Avon, it's me, Blake.
Stand still!
Be so kind as to drop your guns. I'm a Federation officer.
The way it is the way it is because of the way we are. These words, spoken by the enigmatic freedom fighter Rog Blake, perfectly capture the uncompromising spirit of Britain's most ambitious science fiction series. In an era when Star Wars was dazzling audiences with space opera spectacle, the BBC quietly launched a very different vision of the future. One where heroes were flawed, victories were temporary, and the line between freedom fighter and terrorist was deliberately blurred. It was 1978, and while American sci-fi basked in newfound blockbuster budgets, the BBC allocated just a fraction of those resources to Terry Nation's dystopian space drama. Each episode was produced on approximately £40,000, less than what Star Wars spent on a single Stormtrooper costume fitting. Yet what emerged from these constraints wasn't just good television, it was revolutionary. Blake 7 gave us a future where Earth had fallen under the control of the totalitarian Federation, a regime maintaining order through drugs, mind control, and brutal military force. Against this oppressive system stood a small band of criminals and political prisoners led by the idealistic Blake, operating from a stolen alien spacecraft called the Liberator. But these weren't your typical clean-cut heroes. Each carried personal demons, selfish motivations, and the potential for both heroism and betrayal. What made Blake 7 truly groundbreaking wasn't its special effects or production values, it was its unwavering commitment to moral complexity in a genre often defined by simplistic battles between good and evil. This wasn't escapist fantasy. It was a dark mirror reflecting the political anxieties of late 1970s. Britain, labor strikes, economic uncertainty, and the shadow of authoritarian government formed the real-world backdrop to this fictional future. While Star Trek offered an optimistic vision of humanity's potential and Star Wars delivered mythic adventure, Blake 7 asked uncomfortable questions. What price freedom? Can you fight totalitarianism without becoming the very thing you oppose? And perhaps most disturbing of all, what if the rebels don't win in the end? Despite its infamous budget constraints, Blake 7 achieved remarkable technical innovations that continue to impress even in our CGI-saturated era. The show pioneered creative uses of color separation overlay, CSO, the BBC's version of chroma key technology, to create alien landscapes and space sequences. While primitive by today's standards, these effects represented cutting-edge television production techniques for the late 1970s. The Liberator itself stands as one of science fiction's most distinctive spacecraft designs. Unlike the militaristic or industrial aesthetics popularized by Star Wars and Star Trek, the Liberator presented a genuinely alien silhouette, organic, crystalline, and utterly foreign. What viewers didn't know was that its iconic three-pronged design originated from a piece of jewelry created by BBC designer Matt Irvine. This remarkable ship was brought to life through a combination of detailed model work and practical lighting effects that maximized its otherworldly appearance despite the limited resources available. The teleportation sequences, now a staple of the show's visual identity, were created through a combination of simple sound effects and a ring of lights that would build to a crescendo before the characters disappeared. This practical effect, combined with the distinctive teleport bracelets, became one of the show's signature elements, accomplishing what Star Trek did with far more expensive dissolve effects. Perhaps most impressive was the show's commitment to location filming. While interior scenes were shot on video in BBC studios, the production team ventured to quarries, industrial sites, and natural landscapes across Britain to create alien worlds. The juxtaposition between these film-shot exteriors and video-recorded interiors created a distinctive visual language that, while born of necessity, became an integral part of the show's atmosphere. The Federation's aesthetic deserves special mention for its fascist-inspired design elements. The clinical white of Supreme Commander Servalan's headquarters contrasted sharply with the black-uniformed, helmeted troopers who enforced her will. These design choices weren't merely stylistic, they visually reinforced the show's central themes of authoritarian control versus individual freedom. Behind the scenes, the production faced relentless challenges. The weekly television schedule demanded rapid turnarounds with minimal rehearsal time. Scripts often arrived late, forcing actors to memorize complex dialogue with little preparation. Special effects sequences had to be planned meticulously, as the budget allowed for few second chances. Yet somehow, under these pressures, the production team consistently delivered stories that prioritized ideas over spectacle. Creator Terry Nation, already famous for creating Doctor Who's Daleks, fought constantly to maintain his vision of a morally complex universe. His original concept called for even darker storylines than what eventually aired. But even in their compromised form, the episodes pushed boundaries for what was considered acceptable in British television drama. This tension between creative ambition and practical limitations ultimately defined Blake Seven's visual identity, one that valued imagination over polish, substance over spectacle. Blake's Seven assembled a cast that elevated the material far beyond its budget, creating characters whose complexity and moral ambiguity continue to resonate with audiences. At the heart of this ensemble was Gareth Thomas as Roge Blake, the idealistic revolutionary whose single-minded pursuit of justice against the Federation drove the series forward. Thomas brought a fierce intensity to Blake, portraying him not as a flawless hero, but as a man potentially compromised by his own zealotry. In episodes like Trial, we witness Blake's willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for his cause, raising uncomfortable questions about the moral cost of revolution. Thomas's unexpected departure after the second season created one of television's most dramatic power vacuums, forcing the series to reinvent itself. Into this vacuum stepped Paul Darrow as Kerr Avon, delivering what would become the show's most iconic performance. Initially introduced as a supporting character, a cold, calculating computer genius interested only in self-preservation, Avon evolved into the show's complex anti-hero. Darrow's sardonic delivery and barely contained rage made Avon simultaneously frightening and compelling. His gradual assumption of leadership revealed new dimensions to the character, culminating in the series finale where his descent into paranoia and rage provided one of television's most shocking conclusions. Darrow once described Avon as a man who would rather kill you than shake your hand, but might shake your hand, perfectly capturing the character's unpredictable moral compass. Jacqueline Pierce's Supreme Commander, later President Servalan, shattered feminine villain stereotypes with her combination of ruthless ambition and sensual elegance. Dressed in pristine white gowns with her distinctive cropped hair, Servalan represented power, corruption, and deadly charm. Pierce brought a predatory sexuality to the role that was revolutionary for British television, particularly in scenes opposite Darrow's Avon, where their mutual attraction and murderous intentions created an electric dynamic. Their confrontation in Terminal remains one of the series' most emotionally devastating moments, showcasing both actors at the height of their powers. Michael Keating's Vila Restal initially appeared to be simple comic relief, a cowardly thief whose primary interests were self-preservation and alcohol. Yet Keating infused the character with a working-class authenticity and vulnerability that made Vila the series' most relatable character. The episode City at the Edge of the World revealed unexpected depths to Vila, while his deteriorating relationship with Avon culminated in the harrowing Orbit, where Avon calculates Vila's weight while looking for ballast to jettison from a crashing shuttle, a scene that still shocks viewers with its casual cruelty. Behind these performances lay fascinating casting stories. Gareth Thomas initially rejected the role, concerned about being typecast in science fiction. Paul Darrow modeled his performance on Clint Eastwood, creating a space-age gunslinger whose clip delivery and dangerous stillness defined the character. Jacqueline Pierce was originally intended to appear in only a few episodes, but her electric performance led to Servalan becoming the series' primary antagonist. The series culminated in what remains one of television's most shocking finales. The final episode, Blake, reunited the original protagonist with his former crew in a conclusion that subverted every heroic trope. The ambiguous, devastating final frames, Avon standing over Blake's body, surrounded by Federation troops, smiling as the screen cuts to black after gunfire, continues to provoke debate among fans decades later. This unflinching commitment to moral complexity and willingness to deny viewers a traditional happy ending remains the show's most profound legacy. Blake Seven's debut in January 1978 was met with a curious mix of critical disdain and audience enthusiasm. British television critics, accustomed to the BBC's prestigious dramas and comedies, initially dismissed the series as juvenile science fiction with wobbly sets and implausible plots. The Guardian famously described it as a pantomime in space, while others mocked its visual effects as Blue Peter in space, referencing a children's craft show. Yet despite these critical barbs, Blake 7 immediately connected with viewers, regularly attracting over 10 million people in a country of just 56 million. The show's controversial elements contributed to both its criticism and its growing cult status. The level of violence was unprecedented for a BBC drama in that era, with characters regularly killed on screen and the heroes themselves engaging in morally questionable actions. The episode Pressure Point shocked audiences with the death of a beloved character, while Rumors of Death featured torture scenes that pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable in the family viewing hour. The BBC received numerous complaints about the show's dark content, yet these same elements attracted viewers tired of sanitized science fiction. The most fascinating evolution occurred between seasons 2 and 3, when Gareth Thomas departed the series. What had been Blake 7 became effectively Avon 7, with Paul Durow's character assuming leadership of the rebel group. This transition could have destroyed the show, but instead, it reinvigorated it. The series leaned into Avon's moral ambiguity, creating increasingly complex scenarios where the line between hero and villain blurred beyond recognition. By the 4th season, the original freedom-fighting mission had evolved into a desperate struggle for survival, reflecting the increasingly pessimistic political climate of early 1980s Britain. Behind the scenes, fascinating details remained hidden from viewers for decades. The Liberator's distinctive design was, remarkably, adapted from a piece of costume jewelry spotted by a production designer. The character of Servalan was originally written as a man, but the casting of Jacqueline Pierce transformed the role into one of television's most memorable female villains. Perhaps most significantly, the show's iconic downbeat ending wasn't the original plan. A potential 5th season was discussed, which would have revealed that some characters had survived. When the BBC decided to cancel the series, producer David Maloney and script editor Chris Boucher chose to end with the ultimate statement of the show's pessimistic philosophy. The audience relationship with Blake 7 transformed over time from mainstream popularity to dedicated cult following. The series' final episode in December 1981 drew 8.5 million viewers and inspired thousands of shocked letters to the BBC. In subsequent years, as science fiction television became more sophisticated, critics began re-evaluating Blake 7, recognizing its groundbreaking approach to moral complexity and political allegory. By the 1990s, television historians were citing it as a crucial bridge between the optimistic science fiction of the 1960s and the darker, more morally ambiguous genre television that would follow. What had once been dismissed as cheap escapism was increasingly recognized as a daring experiment in bringing psychological depth and political commentary to a genre often dismissed as trivial. Blake's 7's DNA is embedded in virtually every morally complex science fiction series that followed it. J. Michael Straczynski openly acknowledged its influence on Babylon 5, particularly in his creation of characters with conflicting ideologies and his willingness to explore the darker aspects of heroism. The political machinations, season-long story arcs, and the portrayal of deeply flawed protagonists in Babylon 5 all owe a debt to Blake Seven's pioneering approach to television science fiction. Perhaps most visibly, Joss Whedon's Firefly borrowed numerous elements from Blake's Seven, a small crew of rebels with questionable pasts aboard a distinctive spacecraft, fighting against an oppressive alliance. The character dynamics, particularly the tension between idealism and pragmatism, echo the Blake-Avon relationship that drove Blake Seven's narrative. Even the production design of Firefly, mixing high-tech environments with frontier grittiness, mirrors Blake Seven's approach to creating a lived-in future on a limited budget. Modern Doctor Who, especially during the Russell T Davies era, incorporated Blake Seven's willingness to explore darker themes and political commentary. Davies, a vocal fan of the series, brought a similar approach to balancing character drama with science fiction concepts. The portrayal of the Time Lords as a corrupt institution rather than benevolent overseers particularly echoed Blake's Seven's skepticism towards centralized authority. What makes Blake's Seven remarkably relevant today is how prescient its political themes have proven. Its vision of a society controlled through surveillance, misinformation, and the criminalization of dissent resonates powerfully in our age of digital monitoring and government overreach. The Federation's use of drugs to pacify the population and its manipulation of media to control. The narrative feel less like science fiction and more like dystopian journalism in the 21st century. When Blake discovers that his memories have been altered to serve political ends, it presages contemporary concerns about fake news and information warfare. The cult following that keeps Blake Seven alive demonstrates its enduring impact. Despite no official revival, though numerous attempts have been made, the series continues through audio dramas from Big Finish Productions, fan films, and regular convention appearances by surviving cast members. This grassroots enthusiasm speaks to how deeply the show's characters and themes connected with viewers. In an era where streaming services pour millions into science fiction spectacles, Blake Seven's focus on character and ideas over visual effects offers valuable lessons for contemporary creators. Its willingness to present flawed heroes, question revolutionary ideals, and deny viewers the comfort of clear moral victories makes it feel more modern than many contemporary productions. The series finale, with its ambiguous, devastating conclusion, would not feel out of place in today's era of prestige television. Yet it aired on BBC One in 1981. Perhaps Blake Seven's greatest legacy is its demonstration that limitations can breed creativity. The series turned its budget constraints into strengths, focusing on character conflicts and political themes rather than spectacle. In doing so, it created something more lasting than many better-funded contemporaries. In a genre often accused of prioritizing special effects over substance, Blake Seven remains a powerful reminder that the most compelling science fiction is ultimately about people, their struggles, their failings, and their capacity for both heroism and villainy. As we look to a future increasingly shaped by technology, surveillance capitalism, and battles over personal freedom, Blake's question, "How many more will have to die before you realize that's all the same war?" remains as urgent and unsettling as it was over 4 decades ago. In Blake Seven's morally complicated universe, we may find better guidance for navigating our own ambiguous times than in more optimistic science fiction. After all, as Avon coldly observed, idealism kills. It's a fact of life. That unflinching realism might be exactly what we need. So what's your favorite moment from Blake Seven? Did you side with Blake's revolutionary idealism or Avon's pragmatic cynicism? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this exploration of one of science fiction's most influential series, Hit subscribe for more deep dives into cult television classics.